Hello and welcome to this Warwick Economic Summit interview with Seema Malhotra. She is the Labour MP and Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury. So we'll start with talking about you. Can you tell us how did you get into politics and what made you want to be a politician?
I got into politics quite by chance actually. I was growing up, as many will, just in Hounslow in West London, and was the daughter of parents who had come to Britain. Was born in London. I didn't start off with politics. What happened for me, I think, is I became very interested in the community and community life. I became very interested in why people were, some were better off than others and some were worse off. I used to observe quite a lot and think about that. Think also about why, if I saw it, men were treated differently or women were treated differently to men. So I was quite interested in inequality, I guess, without always knowing that language. And so for me, I then became very involved in community work when I was in my secondary school, involved in voluntary projects, working with those with disabilities in the community, play schemes, and then started to be involved in community campaigns as well to change things. I think there is absolutely one thing to always remember, which is the world is as it is because of decisions that somebody else has made before. So there is absolutely no reason why there isn't the right to change anything or to try and change anything. Yeah. That to me led to a lot of being involved in a lot of campaigns around the environment, with Amnesty International, with anti-apartheid as it was at that time. Nelson Mandela was still in prison, and when you are influenced by those global social justice movements as a young person, I think they can dictate values that you hold forever. It was then being involved in those campaigns that led me to politics. And for the Labour Party, it's because I believe in the values of the Labour Party. And I believe fundamentally in equality as something we should aspire to. I believe very much in that there's something we have responsibility to that's bigger than ourselves, i.e. to not just think about what we take, but also what we give in life and in the world, and that people who have less chance should have an equal chance, and we support that. So those values for me were what drew me to the Labour Party and have always kept me there. And it was the choice to join a political party that I think was a turning point. And it was for this simple reason, which is that you can be involved in thinking about a better world, in campaigning for change. There's so many campaigns now, online as well, petitions, of ours, change.org, 38 degrees. As politicians, we get all of the emails coming from our constituents and many others into our inbox. And there's a global movement now of being able to accelerate campaigns. But in all of those, what you're doing is influencing somebody else to try and make a decision. And for me, what was also a turning point was thinking it shouldn't just be about trying to influence other people, that sometimes you have to step forward into those decision-making fora too, which isn't easy, but I believe it's for me it was a real sense of responsibility to be involved in our democracy. It led to me being a politician, but for me it starts out fundamentally with voting and supporting our democracy. That's how I started, and then over a period of 15 years, as I had a life in business and in the public sector, the Labour Party was like a second job to me, and led me to eventually being elected as a politician.
Yeah, you talked about equality and wanting to make a change. So did the sort of lack of ethnic minorities, and particularly South Asian and particularly women in government, was that a sort of motivational factor for you to try and be the change, be someone in that group who would go through and hopefully inspire others?
Well, representation for me is vital. Representation in decision making in all of our institutions, as well as in politics and in public life. I believe that as a politician that's both an ethnic minority and a woman, that we have additional responsibilities. I am at my core a Labour politician, just as I am with my colleagues and we debate issues around housing, planning, infrastructure, issues around Bank of England reform, poverty in our society. We do all of those things as mainstream politicians. But when you look at where there are extra disadvantages, whether that's the gender pay gap or it is the lower level of employment amongst ethnic minorities, you do see that there are wider inequalities. And I believe, as somebody from a minority and ethnic and minority background, that when I say additional responsibility, I mean that we have, I believe, a different role to reach out, because it does make a difference when people see that there are people who are a bit more like them that are in politics too. So we are part of a changing face of UK politics, where we have connections with where our families are from as well, but we are firmly British politicians, being Labour or whichever party, and recognising what we bring additionally to our party politics, our experience of life, our experience of community, our experience and our heritage.
So let's move on to talk about the economy, which you talked about in your time at the panel. This week, the Bank of England cut its growth forecast for the UK, and George Osborne recently talked about a cocktail of threats to the UK economy. What are your views on the current state of the UK economy? Should we be concerned about future growth prospects?
I am very concerned about the UK economy and the downgrading of growth. Not just that, but we've seen average wage growth forecasts also reduce. This is important because it starts a very important debate about what we are subject to when there are global headwinds of change and uncertainty, the slowdown in China and emerging markets, to some extent the instability in Europe that has potentially led to greater costs, as well as we look at some of the social problems that we're helping tackle, and also the uncertainty in the Middle East that is leading to wider engagement from the international community. There's a lot of change at a macro level. The question then is how much your economy has got the defences and is robust against some of those headwinds of change. We believe that George Osborne has not invested enough in Britain to mean that we can withstand more the shocks that may come. And so there is nothing that is hugely unexpected. What does concern me is that he does not turn his eye inward enough to what more he should be doing. Why is it that only 9% of his infrastructure projects have actually started? Infrastructure is the start of seeing stronger productivity, which drives wages, which drives output, and which drives your connection in the economy. Why have we seen a continual missing of our export targets? Why is it we don't have a much stronger relationship between our economy and some of the emerging markets that are seeing high levels of growth? If they're seeing high levels of growth, we should be able to benefit from that too, if we're strategic about how we develop our relationships. But one of the consequences of the government's immigration policy has also been that it has been harder for people who want to be supporting economic activity, maybe starting businesses or invest, to actually visit Britain, to be able to identify and work on those opportunities. So we've had other policies from within the government work against economic policies being more successful. So it is a concern, but I believe there's more that we can do to turn it around and prepare ourselves much more robustly for the future.
Yes, and I guess if you were elected, you would like to change some of these things. But one of Labour's perceived weaknesses, shall we say, has been regarding their handling of the economy. What can the party do to convince the electorate that they can be responsible and effective in managing the economy if elected?
There's still a debate about exactly what happened around 2007 and 2008, and certainly a large number of economists have said and credited Gordon Brown with what he did, bringing together finance ministers from around the world and our international economic institutions to prevent the crisis being worse than it was. It was largely driven and started by irresponsible lending in America, giving particularly mortgages to householders that couldn't afford to pay it back. The defaulting then of those loans and the consequent debt being wrapped up and debt being sold and then effectively being a bubble that burst. Now, that wasn't one government to either cause that or should take responsibility. But even though we were in power, and even though much of what we did support the growth of the economy, get us back on keel, the economy was growing faster in 2010 when we lost power. It then slowed, the trajectory changed as a result of decisions that this government made. So I believe that economists and economic historians will look again at the decisions that were made post-2010 and say, what was it that led to the trajectory that was going one way actually slowing and then becoming the slowest recovery that we've seen from a recession in 300 years? I believe that some of that goes towards the Labour Party saying that whatever the issues were in 97 and whether or not we could have seen a shorter recession, we did see a recovery that came out because we made the right decisions. And it was an international crisis in which we played a huge part with putting it back on a stronger footing, the economy is back on a stronger footing. But what we also have to do now, 6 years on from when we first lost power, is to say that we see there being an economic alternative. That's the argument that we're making, where I believe that we're seeing increasingly journalists coming on side, saying that the rhetoric that's coming from the Chancellor is not matched with what the opportunities could be, that sometimes there is a narrative and a story that is covering up the underlying weakness in the economy, that we could be treating that differently. And I believe it's through the conversation now about the economic alternative, as well as an assessment about why did the recovery slow down, as well as the ongoing assessment about what were the factors that were in play, the important ones, because we're seeing a number of the indicators, particularly with household debt rising in the UK, potentially setting the scene for a recession in the future. We don't want that to happen. If it does happen, we want us to have a stronger defence. That's how we're looking to challenge the Chancellor now, and I believe put ourselves back on that road of winning back the public confidence.
Okay, so looking forward, the role of Chief Secretary or Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury has sometimes been a precursor to the role of Chancellor or Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer. Is this a role that you would be interested in, would like to take in the future, if offered the opportunity?
Well, I've only actually ever thought about my role, which was itself a big step. And I think that you don't think about the future really in politics in that way. For us, we're a really good team. So I work very closely with John McDonnell, who I think has been, in some ways unexpected, a really innovative Shadow Chancellor from whom I have learnt a lot and I'm continuing to learn a lot. If you look at what Labour is doing now, and if you look at how we've set up a Council of Economic Advisors, where we're saying we don't just need to refresh our thinking for now, we want to be thinking about the long term. We want to be thinking about how we bring in new ideas, because as we had in the debate earlier, the traditional levers of monetary policy aren't delivering the outcomes that are expected. We've got to have different ways of thinking about how we stimulate growth, how we think about who benefits from the proceeds of that growth. And so my role is absolutely to support John's vision for where we can take that. And we work very, very closely together. It's how we're starting to set our line and our journey, both in terms of the politics of fairness and the politics of responsible economics, set that apart from the Conservatives. And at the same time say, it's not just that politicians should be making these decisions, we've got to bring a country with us. That's why we're starting economic debates. That's why I was so keen to come and be part of the debate at the Warwick Economic Summit this weekend. Because if you bring people along and you share the conversation about economics, you demystify it, and then you can make sure you engage people in the best decisions.
Okay. So just to wrap it up, we've had you for the panel. It was a very engaging and interesting panel. and we've had you shortly. So what has been your impressions and experience of the Warwick Economic Summit?
I think it's been an excellent economic summit. I think it's a real tribute to the students of Warwick, and as a Warwick alumnus, I am also very proud of that, and I wish the rest of the summit every success.
Thank you very much, Ms. Malhotra.